Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for another Cook with OC program today. Before we begin today's webinar, Osteoporosis Canada acknowledges the land that our offices, located in Toronto, are on, is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. My name is Tracie Napoli, Director of Fund Development and MARCOM at Osteoporosis Canada, and I will be your host for today. In addition to everyone who will be cooking along, we will have Zoom attendees who will be watching and learning how to make our featured recipe. So a big welcome to everyone. This webinar will provide general information about cooking and food knowledge. It is not intended as individualized health or nutrition advice, and if you have questions about nutrition, consult a physician or registered dietitian. A big thank you to our partner, thinkbeef.ca, for partnering with us on this cooking webinar. And during the webinar, if you have a question or comment, you can either click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen or enter a comment in the chat, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can during the webinar within the time available. Nutrition is a key component for strengthening and maintaining healthy bones, as well as in the prevention and management of osteoporosis. We are working to provide strategies, new ideas, and develop recipes to help you get the bone-building nutrients needed for bone health. Osteoporosis Canada recommends that whenever possible, get your calcium and protein through food sources. Including protein in your diet at every meal benefits both muscle and bone health. Some examples are beef, eggs, fish, white beans, chickpeas, nuts, milk, yogurt, and cheese. The featured ingredient in today's cooking demo is beef, which has many essential nutrients packed into each small serving and is a high-quality protein providing nutrients that are difficult to get from other foods like iron, zinc, and vitamin B12. Beef is a concentrated source of nutrients, providing a variety of essential vitamins and minerals for a small amount of food. Also, make sure to eat a variety of foods, including fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and foods that are calcium-rich, like yogurt, cheese, legumes, broccoli, bok choy, and almonds. Here are some tips to help make preparing meals easier and more enjoyable. Do a meal plan to help reduce food waste and stay on budget. Check out flyers and specials for sale items that can be purchased and stored for later use. Choose versatile ingredients and keep staples on hand in the pantry or freezer. Now, if you're finding that you're getting tired while standing when you're cooking, bring over a stool and sit instead. You can also plan your cooking day when someone can help with heavier items like lifting pots and small appliances. And always ask for help when needed. And our favorite is to freeze the extra portions to enjoy later. Today's cook-along demo features air fryer sweet potato topped mini meat loaves with 36 grams of protein and 450 milligrams of calcium per serving. Now, for those of you who don't have an air fryer, not to worry, instruction will be provided to use your oven. You can get this recipe and others at osteoporosis.ca/recipes. I will also put a link to the recipe in the chat. It's now my pleasure to welcome our friend, Emily Richards, a professional home economist, freelance food writer, chef, and she is the author and co-author of 10 cookbooks. Emily also writes and develops recipes for print and online publications that include everyday cooking and healthy eating. And Emily can be found on TV, radio, and webcasts just like this one. Please welcome Emily.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Tracie. I'm so happy to be here on this very cold Wednesday night here in Guelph with lots of snow. I don't know if it's the same for where everybody else is, but we're going to be warm in the kitchen, so that's what I'm excited about. So we are going to be cooking tonight, and I have some friends joining us. I also have my dogs here that are probably hungry too, who knows. And first off, I do have the recipe right in front of me because that's really important. I tend to forget things as I'm cooking along. And because I have everybody cooking with me, I don't want to forget anything because we're going to work together as a team. If you see kind of some steam happening beside me, it's because we're really cooking. And these are the sweet potatoes for our topping. So myself and my cook along friends have our sweet potatoes on. So Tracie, is there anything you want to let everybody know before we get started?
Hi, actually, sir, I'm just going to say, Arvin, can you activate my video again? Yes. So we have some friends who are cooking along with us in real time, and we also will be giving away one of our favorite unbreakable aprons. And so if you're still on the webinar at the end, I will pick a name randomly, and then we will ship you one of these aprons. So looking forward to getting started. Let's jump in, Emily. I know everyone's probably hungry to make this and have their dinner.
Yes, 100%. I know I am. And apparently the dogs are. So it is my kitchen. So if you do hear the dogs, it's just because they're little and you know, they want attention. Just like everybody in the house when you're cooking dinner, right? All right, so we are going to get started with our meatloaf. So this is a great recipe because you're kind of doing multiple things at the same time, so it comes together quickly. So this part, the sweet potatoes are kind of taking care of themselves. So the option here is we're going to put them on top because it's a lovely color to add to our meatloaf. But if you're not a fan of having things touching, as some kids do, I know I have family members that don't like things touching, you can always just serve it on the side. So this is our kind of side dish that we're working on at the same time. So we're gonna deal with that once the sweet potatoes are cooked. They usually take about 15 to 20 minutes. And because we're only making 4 mini meatloaves, we only need about 2 sweet potatoes for this, okay? So let's get onto our meatloaf. And this is fabulous because we're using a wonderful protein, and that is Canadian beef. And we're using ground beef, which is affordable, family friendly, and takes on flavor. And we're going to give it some unique flavor. We're going to add a few ingredients. And I know maybe some of you are thinking, oh, Emily, some of those ingredients, if you took a look at the recipe, not my favorite. That's okay. It's all about substitutions and availability of what you have at home sometimes. And a lot of these ingredients you might actually have in your pantry already. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start by talking about herbs and green onions. We are using parsley as our herb, but we're going to be using green onions as well in the meatloaf. So this is a great way if you're not a super big fan of having onions in your meatloaf. I love onions in pretty much everything, but sometimes it can have that raw flavor if you're not cooking it prior to putting it in the meatloaf. So that's where green onions come in really, really handy, and a nice soft green onion flavor. So I'm just going to use 1 green onion. If you love green onions, you can use a couple here. I'm just going to use 1, and we're going to just chop it up. Okay. So I already washed these, but sometimes you'll get that fine layer right on top. Just kind of remove that because that can be a little bit slippery. And we're just going to chop this up. Now I do have my bowl handy because we're going to add everything into a bowl. So if you have family members that are not fans of little bits, visible bits, just cut this up a little bit smaller, okay? So I'm just going to give this a nice little chop, and that's going to give us a nice little bit of color and flavor in our meatloaf. So we really want to focus on the ease of this meal tonight because it's a weeknight. We're busy. We want to make sure that everyone gets fed. And if you have helpers in the kitchen, some of my cook along friends have helpers in the kitchen tonight, which makes it so much faster and easier to kind of get dinner on the table. So I always think the more the merrier. Even if you have a small kitchen, especially on a cold night, it gets nice and cozy in there. All right, so I'm going to put my green onion in my bowl, okay? And then I'm going to measure out a few ingredients. So the question might be is, and I know Tracie and I were talking about this earlier, is there's calcium in here, and we're using a super source of protein by using the ground beef. So you heard the recipe has 36 grams of protein per serving. The majority of that is coming from our ground beef, which is perfect. but we're gonna pump it up with some calcium and some flavor by using some Parmesan cheese, okay? So I'm gonna measure out, we're using Parmesan cheese twice. We're using some in our meatloaf and we're using some in our topping. So that actually acts as a seasoning. It's a great little tip to use as a thickener or a seasoning in lots of recipes. So in our meatloaf goes 1/3 cup, and I'm using pre-grated Parmesan. If you have fresh Parm, you could totally use that. But in our kits that we got, everyone who's cooking with me got some grated Parmesan. So this kind of speeds up the process a little bit. So we're gonna get that in our bowl. And then we're also going to season this with a little bit of salt and pepper. So just a 1/4 teaspoon of each. If you're kind of watching sodium, you can leave the salt out or reduce the sodium. That's totally okay. This is just to kind of balance out all those other flavors that are going to come together. And I'm going to measure out my 1/4 teaspoon of pepper in there too. Okay. Now, if you're thinking you like herbs and spices, the world is your oyster here. You could add a little bit of chili powder in here, some Italian seasoning, about 1/2 teaspoon or a teaspoon. So if you're kind of digging through your pantry thinking, I really want to use a spice tonight, by all means, you can definitely use 1/2 teaspoon or a teaspoon of anything, really, because the beef really accepts that flavor. And because everything is so mild that we're using, it will just bump up that flavor a little bit more, okay? So here's the ingredient. I know some people might be thinking, horseradish, not my thing. That's okay. You don't have to use the horseradish, but I'll tell you why you want to use it. It's in the recipe for one, but the other reason is because it adds a nice little zip to beef. How many of you have had prime rib, the beautiful prime rib roast, and you got to have that dollop of horseradish beside it, right? It just adds that nice little bit of flavor, rounds out the beef. I love horseradish cream, just a little bit of whipped cream with horseradish alongside my prime rib or even on a beef sandwich. Absolutely delicious. So that's why we're using the horseradish here. Now, if you're still thinking, Emily, forget it, no horseradish for me, you can use other ingredients that will add that little bit of zip. So think of things like mustard, has that nice little bit of acidic tang to it. So a Dijon mustard will work really well here, or even a grainy mustard that will give you a nice little pop when you bite into your meatloaf, okay? If you don't have any of those, you could also use some dry mustard. You only need about a teaspoon, but we're using a tablespoon of this horseradish. Now, do be aware when you buy horseradish, you can get a hot horseradish, like a really spicy one, or just a mild one. So I'm using a mild horseradish tonight, but if you want to kick up the heat a little bit, you could definitely use a spicy horseradish. Now, I see a lot of movement in the chat. Tracie, are there questions that I'm totally avoiding?
No, actually, could you move the bag in front of the bowl just down?
Oh, for sure.
We can't see what's in the bowl. Sorry. So yes, now that we do have questions, and I just wanted to welcome everyone. Everyone is busy getting who's cooking with us on the cook along. They look great. I can see lots of things happening. But that was a question. I do love horseradish. However, you've answered that question. Someone actually did say, can we substitute? What about dry mustard? Could you do dry mustard or Dijon or just your regular yellow mustard? What would you do if you didn't want to use horseradish or you didn't have it on hand?
So to get that kind of equivalent amount of tang and vinegary flavor, I would go with the Dijon mustard. Grainy mustard made from kind of the same wonderful mustard has that nice little pop to it, a little bit of texture, which is nice. If all you have is yellow, kind of that ballpark mustard, you could totally use that. It's not going to add as much zip, which is totally okay, but it will definitely add flavor. And if all you have is dry mustard or ground mustard, depends on how you refer to it, same thing. You can use about a teaspoon. I find that gets a little bit spicier because it is a dried mustard, and you can use that as well. So there's lots of great options to use to offer up that little bit of flavor. So when we use ingredients like horseradish in a different way, what we're looking for is kind of the elements behind it. So horseradish has that a bit of acidity, a little bit of heat, and it also has that nice little tang. So think of lemon juice, for example, kind of using it the same way, or a vinegar. So this time, horseradish and beef to me, I think are quite a nice marriage. So that's why we're definitely gonna add it here. So this is our flavoring. This is our flavoring of our meatloaf. So nice and simple, maybe ingredients that you always have on hand, easy to use. And I'm going to add my ground beef. So I am using lean ground beef, and that is going to give us a really nice texture, and it's a pound that we're using. So I'm going to open this package, and sometimes this is the hardest thing, is opening the package. So I'm just going to cut it and not pretend like I will be able to open it smoothly. There we go. Okay, and then just put this right into the bowl, okay? There. Now, we're gonna mix this up. Now, your first intention might be to get in there and start, squishing the meat around. I don't want you to be too vigorous with this ground beef. I want you to just make sure that everything is mixed together. So almost kind of like spread it out and just fold everything in. So pretend you're making bread. And with that ground beef, you're folding in all the ingredients. I find that what that does is it doesn't overwork the ground beef, but you're still making sure that all your ingredients are coming through nicely, okay? And that Parmesan is also acting as a little bit of what sometimes you'll hear as breadcrumbs are used in meatloaf as a filler. But here, it's not really so much a filler as a big flavor component, okay? So just like that. And we are really focusing on that wonderful ground beef. You don't have to add a lot of things to ground beef. Oh, I wanted to show you because this is always a question that has been coming up as of late. If those of you that are cooking along looked at your package of ground beef and it said ingredients, what do you think it said on the ingredient list? Beef, ground beef. So it's just fabulous to know that you're using a single product and adding just a few other ingredients to make a wonderful dinner, okay? So once you've seen everything absorbed here, so if you take a look in my bowl, I don't have any more bits in my bowl. If I bring this closer up, you can see that there's a nice distribution of the green onions there and the Parmesan cheese. Now, this is something, when I make meatballs, this is something my grandmother taught me, and she always did, is she always took the meat and smelled it, okay? And if it smells good raw, you know it's gonna be amazing cooked, okay? So that's always my little tip. I just lost an earpiece, but that's okay. I think you'll still be able to hear me. All right, so now we're making 4 of these mini meatloaves. We're gonna divide this into 4, so break it in half. This is where your math comes in handy. Okay, if you want to be very specific, you can just pop this onto a scale and divide it evenly by weight. But here are my 4 big meatballs. And then we're going to shape these into ovals. Okay, so just kind of like that. We want them about 1 inch thick. So think of an oval patty. Okay. And we want them all the same thickness so that they cook evenly. So whether you're doing this in an air fryer or in the oven, the point is to cook them evenly. And then I'm just going to put them back in the bowl. Okay. So as I'm doing this, I'm kind of pushing the ground beef together so that you don't end up with kind of air pockets in your meatloaf, so that it's a nice solid piece of beef. Okay. There we go. There's my 3rd one. And then I'm going to work on this last one here. So we have these nice. So I'm tonight going to be doing a couple in the air fryer and a couple in the oven, just so that I can talk about both and cook both at the same time. Now we're doing a recipe for 4 servings. This recipe easily doubles or triples if you have a larger family, or if you want to freeze them. So you can actually take this mixture now, this fresh ground beef meatloaf mixture, shape them, and then pop them in the freezer till they're frozen. So on a baking sheet, freeze them, take them off once they're frozen, put them in an airtight container, and then you have meatloaf ready to go when you want, just to pop in the oven. So I'm just going to wash my hands before we keep going here.
Hey, Emily, while you're doing that, I'm going to jump in. And because somebody had asked a question, and are you able to pop in that other earpiece?
I will, for sure.
Oh, Awesome. I know you were making those mini meatloaves. So we had a couple of questions from people saying, where is the calcium coming from? Like 450 milligrams of calcium per serving. And basically where that's coming from is the Parmesan cheese. And we also have shredded cheddar. But just so you know, the harder the cheese is, the more calcium it has. So 1 tablespoon of Parmesan has 70 milligrams of calcium. So if we're using a quarter cup, which is 4 tablespoons, we're doing math tonight, Emily, where it's 280 milligrams of calcium, plus the shredded cheese, plus. So that's where the calcium is coming from. And before we go back to you, why don't we check in on some of our cooks tonight? How's everyone doing? Let's see. We've got people who are mixing, and let's see, Corrine is there, and we've got Paula and Deborah and Steve. So lots of people, and Jody, Edith is there. Hi, Pamela. I know it's like the magic bus, right? We're all saying hi. And we've got Laura and I think I said Edith too. So you guys are all looking great. Do you guys have any questions for Emily? Are you all good? We're going to keep going. Okay, thumbs up. We're going to keep going. All right, Emily.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So let's check our sweet potatoes. They kind of just do their own thing, but it's always a good idea to check on them. I like to make sure that they're not too squishy because they get a little bit waterlogged if they overcook. So I'm just going to take a paring knife and poke it. Okay. And the knife should just go through nice and easily, and they're done. Okay. Now, you know why this will vary? If you chopped your sweet potato in really large pieces or wedges, as opposed to cubing it or cutting it smaller, it'll take a little bit more time. Totally okay. Not to worry. It's just going to simmer a little bit longer. Mine are cooked. So what I'm going to do is drain them and just put them right back into the pot. Okay. So I have my colander. I'm going to pop it in the sink. And then I'm going to bring it right back to show you what they look like. So this is them going in before. So saucepan, nice and easy. And there's no salt in here because we're going to be adding that seasoning to our sweet potatoes afterwards. So you don't need to salt the water before you put the sweet potatoes in. So make sure you drain them as best you can. Okay. And then I'm going to bring them back over here. I'm just going to scooch this over because I don't need, there we go. All right. So there are my sweet potatoes. Now, for those of you that like maybe trying new things, or you have something in the freezer, there's frozen sweet potatoes that you could use that are already cubed. So those cook up really quickly. Sometimes they're a great value. So you can always have, sweet potatoes at the ready if you don't want to peel them. And this is handy for those of you that might struggle peeling potatoes. So you can do this also with squash. So you can pick up frozen squash and do the same thing. Okay. And treat it in the same manner. So you would boil it or steam it, much less, obviously, if it's frozen. You don't need to cook it for as long, but you could still mash it and treat it exactly as we're going to do tonight. So we're going to bring back that awesome bit of Parmesan cheese. And we're also going to add a little bit of seasoning, some salt and pepper. Now I'm using my good old potato masher. Now this is something that for those of you that have osteoporosis, you may struggle sometimes in holding and mashing. So what I would recommend is you can use 2 things. You can use a hand mixer if that's comfortable for you, or you could pop this into the food processor and just give it a few pulses with the ingredients, and you'll get a really nice smooth product. Does it need to be super smooth? No way. I'm a big believer of having that homemade mashed look. So if there's a few lumps in it, all the better. Okay. So I'm just going to do a kind of a rough little mash. And I'm going to add, so now we're using a 1/4 cup of our Parmesan cheese. And that's going to go right in here. And then I'm going to season this with a little bit of salt and pepper. Where's my measuring spoon? I have everything here. So this is kind of the true way that I think most of us cook. I don't have everything measured out in little bowls bubbles, kind of cooking and shaping from the bowl. And it's nice to do that because it is a great way to show you that these things can kind of come together fairly quickly, so that you can get dinner usually in about an hour. The butter. We're going to add some butter to this mash. Now, I wanted to do this. This is kind of just a little quirky thing. All of the cook-along guests got their kits. They got butter. They didn't get a full pound of butter. Sorry, they got half a pound of butter, not a full pound. So it looks like kind of a half of what you would normally get. So the recipe calls for 3 tablespoons. Now, because I'm a little bit of, I enjoy baking, I love using butter. I don't like when people go in there and start cutting up my butter. This is what you're going to do from now on. Well, at least if you remember, if your family members remember. So in every cup of butter, there's 16 tablespoons. Here's our home ec lesson with a little bit of math. So this is 1 cup of butter, so it has 16 tablespoons. So if I cut it in half, now I have 2 8s, and now I have 2 4 tablespoons, right? So you can just cut this so that you can take out your 3 tablespoons and put them in. And now I know that I have still 8, I have 12, 13 tablespoons left, okay? Now, will this always work? Probably not. If you have someone that loves butter on their toast and is gonna go in and start scraping from the top, you might lose a couple tablespoons. But this is always just a nice little way to kind of have butter at the ready, especially if you're a baker at home and you only need a few tablespoons here and there, okay? So that's my little butter. We're going to use that last tablespoon to finish off our green beans after. All right, so now I added my butter in there. The warmth of the sweet potatoes will melt everything up. We're just gonna give that a little mash to mix it up. And it smells really good. I love the aroma that you get when you add cheese to, especially the Parmesan cheese, warm potatoes. Now, for those of you that are not fans, I mentioned squash as an option, but if you're not a fan of sweet potatoes or squash, you can use regular potatoes. I like to use yellow flesh potatoes. Any potato that you have at home will work really, really well. All right, and there's our mash. Okay, I'm just gonna scrape this off. So everyone who's cooking with me tonight, are you guys okay with your sweet potatoes? You got your sweet potatoes going? I see thumbs up and nods, that's a good sign. All right, I'm going to scrape off my masher here. All right, so we have our components ready. We have our sweet potatoes and we have our meat loaves. Any questions before we get into the nitty gritty of cooking these, Tracie?
I think, you know what, everyone, I was just checking the questions. I think we're good. You answered the question. We did get the question on if you want to use white potatoes, can we do that? I think we jump into the air fryer because those are the questions we receive. People want to know more about how to cook with an air fryer. I would love to know how many of us have bought these fancy tools that we're like convinced we're going to use, and then they are still in the box in my case, or we've used them once. And we should really be utilizing stuff as much as we can, and especially if it makes our life easier. So Emily, let's learn about how to make these with the air fryer.
Okay, perfect. Now I don't have a fancy air fryer. We have an air fryer. This is the air fryer here that we have at our house because a few years ago, my daughter, for her birthday, wanted an air fryer. And I said, this is great. She wants to cook. This is fabulous. Let's be clear why she wanted that air fryer. She wanted French fries. She wanted to be able to cut up a potato and make French fries. And I think that's awesome because she does make her own fries. So it became the French fry oven for quite a start of the air fryer. And for many of us, it might just be for French fries, wings, those types of kind of fast things. But as you have seen and as years progressed, we've dived into air fryers much more. And the fabulous part is essentially you can cook anything. And for a small household, it works fabulously because it's just got this small little basket. Now mine's small, there's many, many sizes now. And some ovens actually have air fryers built right in. So if you have that, you have a much larger space to cook a lot more, okay? So it has that smaller oven. It also works very similarly to a convection oven where that fan is moving around, the heat is a little bit hotter, and things cook a little quicker and create that really, really nice crust on the outside. So in our case, we're gonna have a really nice golden meatloaf and topping for our meatloaves, okay? So mine, like a lot of them, have a basket. It's an insert that sits in. This one's very well used, so it's lost a few legs, so we have to kind of push it in. And what I usually do is I do put a little cooking spray on the basket itself. Doesn't need much. It really depends on, again, the brand that you're using. As I said, this isn't anything fancy. It's already it's losing its numbers. So we kind of guess at how long we leave it in. And you can gauge it also by the temperature. So we're using kind of a moderately hot oven at 375. So whether you're doing this in the oven or doing it in the air fryer, you can use the same temperature. The difference is the length of time that you're going to cook it. Because this is a smaller, more concentrated heat that's coming through our air fryer, it doesn't need to cook for as long. So again, the attraction for a lot of people is the fact that things kind of can be cooked quickly and have that really nice golden color on them. So in our case, I'm going to put 2 in the air fryer, just like that, okay? And then I'm going to put 2 on my baking sheet because, as I said, not everyone has an air fryer. That doesn't mean that you can't cook air fryer recipes. You might be Googling something and it says air fry and you think, oh, I can't make it. I don't have an air fryer. You totally can make it. If you love those flavors and you love the concept, you can do it in your oven, okay? So I'm just doing it on parchment paper lined baking sheet. Is just a small little baking sheet like that. And as you notice in both of them, I'm leaving some space around the meatloaves, and that really helps circulate the air to get that nice golden color, okay? Now, depending on your basket size, you might have to kind of maneuver these a little bit to get all 4 in. And if you want, if again, you're cooking for a smaller household, maybe you only need 1 or 2 of these meatloaves, you can just tuck away 2 for later if you wanted to leave them in the fridge overnight. Or as I said earlier, you could freeze them and then cook them later in the week, later in the month, however that might work for you, okay? So that's basically it. I'm gonna set my temperature to 375 here. And typically there's a timer on there. So you can set your timer as well. But what we're gonna do is put those sweet potatoes on top of our meatloaf first, okay? So I'm gonna kind of divide this up into 4, just like that. So it's kind of like a nice mountain going on to our meatloaf, okay? Just like that, and then, whoops-a-daisy. I'm gonna tuck that into here. So we're gonna start with that one, and then I'm gonna get the other 2 ready. My lights have gone on, and you'll start to hear, I guess maybe if I get closer, it's fairly quiet, which is kind of nice, but you can kind of hear that fan moving around so that you get that nice heat happening. All right, so then I'm gonna put my sweet potatoes on these 2 here. Now, if you didn't want to do this, if you didn't want to top your mashed potatoes, you could just keep your sweet potato mixture warm while the meatloaf is cooking and then just serve it alongside, okay? So not to worry. This just kind of makes it fun, super colorful too, okay?
Hey, Emily, while you're doing that, I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
And some from the cook along. Should people spray with some cooking oil the parchment paper?
I don't, when I'm using parchment paper, I don't spray it. If you are worried, parchment paper is really what's kind of the non-stick part of the baking sheet. If you're putting it directly on the baking sheet, you can give it a little cooking spray on top of, if you're cooking it directly on the sheet pan. but the
Okay.
parchment paper kind of protects you, so you don't really have to do that. So I'm gonna pop these into my oven, which I already had preheating, just so
Great.
that I remember
And
that
would you
they're
put
going in there.
parchment paper in the air fryer? Or you don't need to,
So
you just put the meat directly on in the basket?
yeah, you can put it directly in the basket. And the idea with the air fryer is the way the basket sits, it's the air circulating all around it. So then it's cooking nice and evenly. A lot of the times, if you're cooking in an air fryer, you don't really have to flip it because of the air space around that basket. So it's moving around quite nicely. Whereas sometimes in the oven, because it's sitting flat on something, you'll have to turn it. Now, to kind of mimic the air fryer in the oven, you could sit the meatloaves on a little baking rack. Okay, so if you have like what you would use for your roasts, for example, you could use that for your meatloaves, and that will help the air circulate around it. So oftentimes, I know I have many friends that growing up, their moms and grandmothers would pack the meatloaf in a loaf pan and kind of just have it cook in its juices, and then it kind of turned them off meatloaf because they just didn't like the texture that was happening there. Where these types of meatloafs, they're free form, they get that nice crust, which is something I love because the beef is cooking nice and getting golden brown all around. So when you cut into it, it just has that nice, almost like a little crunch to it. That is a really nice texture to the nice, tender, juicy beef inside. So not quite like a steak, but definitely along that lines where it's caramelizing on the outside and juicy on the inside. So hopefully that helps.
Absolutely.
Are there other
Yes,
questions?
we do. So, oh, one just popped in. It says, can you put the loaves on the racks in the air fryers that don't have a round basket? And would you cook them the same amount of time?
Can you put the meatloaves on a basket that doesn't have?
If you don't have a round basket, you just have a rack?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Again, just using that little bit of cooking spray and putting them on for the air fryer, because again, air fryers are changing all the time. There's newer versions. A lot of them look much like an oven or a toaster oven. So the racks are a little bit different, and they're not always this shape. So some of them have a tighter weave of a basket. Others are a little bit larger. But because our meatloaf is about a 4-inch size length, it won't fall through if that's what you're worried about, which I'm guessing that might be why the question came up.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So now's the time that we just get to relax. I'm kidding. We have a few more things to do. We're going to get our topping of our topping. This is kind of what I love about cooking, is that you can kind of add your own creative toppings. You could leave them out. You can do them a little bit differently. But what we're going to do is add a little bit of parsley and cheese to our meatloaf. So I'm going to just take out some of my flat leaf parsley to chop up. And if you've noticed, I did it with the green onions too. This is just something, especially now, a lot of us are kind of considering how much food we're buying. We want it to last. We don't want it to go to waste. Herbs can definitely do that. So you might shy away from buying herbs because you don't want them to go off in your refrigerator. I love having parsley in my refrigerator. I use it pretty much every day. But what I do is when I get it home, I give it a good rinse, put it in your salad spinner if you have one, or towel dry it, and then spread it out. So if it's tied up in one of those little twisty ties, untie it, wash it, spin it dry, and then just kind of lay it out in a single layer and roll it up in some dry paper towel. That just helps. And you can do this with other fresh herbs. I did it with the green onions as well. Keep them in your crisper in the refrigerator just to last a little bit longer so you get that freshness. And then don't just let them sit there. We're using a couple tablespoons tonight in our topping, but I could have very easily added a couple tablespoons right into the beef mixture, which would be lovely, add a nice little bit of color and flavor. And parsley is something that you could chop it up add it into a salad, add it into a salad dressing, a marinade, even just tossing it in some rice just jazzes it up a little bit. So your family might think they're extra special because you've used some parsley tonight. All right, so I'm just gonna chop this up. And if you didn't have parsley, it's not the end of the world. But you could use other herbs too. If you had dried parsley, you could use some of that. You could also use chives. That's always a nice addition. But we're just gonna chop up a couple tablespoons of parsley. And we're going to add it to 1 cup of shredded cheddar. And that's going to be our topping of our meatloaf. Now, I get the opportunity to chat with Tracie before everyone gets on. And sometimes we talk about silly things. Sometimes we talk about serious things. And the serious thing that Tracie told me about tonight is that she hasn't eaten a lot of meatloaf. And that's okay, because not everyone grew up eating meatloaf.
I was worried what you were going to say, Emily. We talked about a lot of stuff. I was waiting.
I don't know, just the meatloaf, just the meatloaf. And some people have different forms of meatloaf. My background's Italian. My grandmother made some interesting versions of meatloaf that were, Italian-esque. And they were always delicious. I'm just going to grab the cheese because I have that in the fridge. And we're using pre-shredded cheese tonight, pre-shredded cheddar. If you have a block of cheddar, block of Swiss, block of Gouda, whatever you happen to have at home, cheese is a delicious way. If you can enjoy cheese, it's a delicious way to add flavor, texture to family meals. Now, in a case where you may be dairy-free, you could use a dairy-free alternate. There's some great products out there that you can use to add, again, a nice little bit of texture and flavor to the dishes that you enjoy. So in our case, we need 1 cup of shredded cheddar. So I'm just going to measure this out. And if you wanted something a little bit stronger, let's say you wanted blue cheese, just imagine that ground beef, horseradish, and blue cheese. Big flavors. If you love that flavor combination, you could totally use some blue cheese in this recipe. I wouldn't use a cup. It's a little bit stronger than cheddar. So I would use maybe half a cup to sprinkle and divide amongst the meatloaf. So here's our 1 cup of cheese. I see I have people measuring along with me, which I love to see. And then I'm going to add my parsley right in here. And if you see me looking off to the side, it's because I continue to look at the recipe. I've made this recipe a bunch of times, but when you're cooking for people or with people, you just don't want to leave anything out. That said, I always tell everyone, if you're cooking with me and I forget something, you really need to tell me. It's really important. I need to know. But I'm gonna double check. I think I have everything in here, Tracie. Yeah, I do.
Well, all actually, right. While you're doing that, so Pamela just messaged. So Pamela's cooking with us tonight, and she said that she actually added the chopped parsley to the ground beef mixture because she misread. And you know what? That is going to be delicious because that's just going to add some herbaceous yumminess to that little mini meatloaf. So Pamela, that is all good. And I'm just going to take a quick look. Is everybody doing okay? We're all chopping the parsley and mixing it in. I see yeses. It's all good. I see Deborah's doing this. She's giving a thumbs up, and Steve is hard at work. So that's a good job, Steve. That's really good. Everyone seems to be
awesome.
Doing well.
I love kind of it's not kind of, I love the camaraderie in the kitchen. I know we're not all in the same kitchen, but we kind of are because we're cooking the same thing. So it's super fun. And even though we may be kind of at slightly different areas or, parts of the recipe, we all get to eat dinner together, essentially. And for those of you that aren't cooking tonight with us, maybe this will inspire you for tomorrow night or the weekend where you can pick up these ingredients and have earbuds that don't keep, I think my ears have shrunk because my earbuds keep falling. No, that's complete lies. I'm going to grab some green beans because we want all of our dinner to be ready kind of at the same time. So this has still got some time to cook. The one thing we are going to do is talk about temperature as well. But let's get some of these green beans in our skillet. So I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm using frozen green beans, okay, and a skillet. I'm going to use a little bit of olive oil. I'm going to save that butter. Remember I said that other tablespoon of butter? I'm going to save that to add a little bit of flavor right at the end. So just about a tablespoon or so of olive oil. And the great part about frozen vegetables is that you could just use what you need. If it's just you're cooking for yourself tonight, just use about a cup. If there's 2 of you, use a couple cups. If you love green beans, by all means, you can always cook up more because tomorrow it'll be a great green bean salad. Okay? So I'm going to cook about half this bag. So that was a little bit more than I wanted, so I'm going to just take some out. Unfortunately, not everybody in my house likes green beans. As a trivia question, in case it were to ever come up, Tracie loves green beans. Just
I
so
do,
you
because
know.
there are other vegetables I'm not a fan of. But no, this is why when we did this, I said, let's have green beans as a side. But really quickly on that, if you want to ramp up your calcium, the side you could pick could be broccoli, rapini, and bok choy has a lot more calcium than those two, but it doesn't matter. It's whatever you have, whatever you want, whatever veg that you want to add. Oh, we've got a quick question here. If you're cooking in the oven, what's the time to cook? Because actually that's not on the recipe because that's the tip. How long would you cook those little meatloaves in the oven?
So when we talked about the difference between oven and air fryer, it's about that hotness of the air fryer versus the oven. So technically it's the same temperature. It's just the way it's cooking, the different method. The air fryer has a more concentrated. If you put your hand behind your air fryer, you'll feel hot air coming out because that's the fan kind of moving around and moving the air. Whereas in the oven, a regular oven, not a convection oven, it will just kind of cook as an oven would. And so you're going to need to add some time. It's not going to take 15 minutes, but it might take 20 or 25 minutes to cook those meatloaves. Now, if you have a convection oven, I still want you to check at 15 minutes because your meatloaves could actually be done. If you want to do a little cheat and speed up your cooking time, you could always increase your heat by about 25 degrees in the oven and cook it at 400. So that will give you more of that even golden brown color that the air fryer will definitely give us, okay? So hopefully that helps with our guests that are cooking in the oven. I didn't put my timer on the oven because I figured it's going to be done after I put this one in anyway, but we are going to check, most importantly, the temperature, okay? So I can't stress enough, if you love cooking Canadian beef of any sort, any cut, having an instant read thermometer or some type of thermometer in your house is very important. You want to cook the beef so that it's, let's say it's a roast, you want it to be beautiful and juicy. In the case of our ground beef, you want it to still be juicy, but you want it to be cooked through. So one of the best ways to do that is with an instant read thermometer. So a lot of us have probe thermometers where you put it in a roast and you put it in the oven and you cook it the whole time. You leave that thermometer in there. That doesn't work for something like this because it's not going to give you that instant read. So mine happens to be digital, okay? And as soon as I open it, it turns on and it's going to tell me the temperature when I insert it into my meatloaf, okay? So I have this at the ready so that when it's almost done, I can check it. So if you're hearing anything, it's my green beans kind of sizzling away here. I am using a non-stick skillet. I'm just going to saute them a little bit. And basically, all I want to do is heat them through so that they're cooked. Now, what I love about doing green beans or other vegetables, frozen corn is amazing like this. I like to call it scorched. Just sounds fancier. But what it does, or blistered, it picks up some of the golden brown color and it's caramelizing in the pan as it's heating through. So it has a really nice roasted look to it, but you've done it in a skillet. And if you do that with corn, What's great about that is that it has a nice toasted flavor. So if you're adding it to, let's say, rice or salsa or anything like that, or let's say you're making tacos, it's a fabulous addition. Okay, so that's kind of what we're doing with our green beans. You don't want to do this over too high of a heat. So I'm just going to turn this down to about a medium. And we can also add some seasoning to our green beans. So if you wanted to add some more of that chopped parsley in here, you could. You could also add a little bit of green onion, but I'm going to keep it plain and simple and just add a little bit of salt and pepper to the green beans. Okay. Tracie, I know we have a lot of people that kind of joined us. Are there any? Oh, I got pepper.
Oh no.
It's fine. I'm good. Do you have any questions from any of our guests that are joining us on the webinar?
Yes, we have some. I'm just, how's everyone first cooking along? For everyone cooking, we're all good? We're all on track? Everyone's good? I've got all the thumbs up. Everyone's, you know, our cook along folks are so good. They just do their thing. They follow along. It's awesome. Yes, so we have a couple of questions. So we love freezing everything. And we get a lot of people who say, I'm just one person or I'm just two people, small household. So for someone maybe who didn't, you know, eat a lot of meatloaf and you just see that big, you know, it's a really big piece and you're thinking, well, why would I make that if I'm a small household? This is the perfect recipe because you're getting smaller portions. So you can freeze them. And a couple of the questions we had is, so Emily, like, would you freeze it before cooking so you could prep it, or would you cook it, cool it, and freeze it? And if so, how long would you cook it after?
So these are great questions. And what I love about this recipe is that it is really suited to kind of a smaller household. So even if you're cooking just for yourself, if you're a student, if you are a single person living at home, or let's say you're a couple and you just want to make something a little bit different, this recipe kind of covers all that. And not only that, you're getting a great amount of calcium and protein in this recipe. So when it comes to freezing, I mentioned that you could freeze those meatloaf. And what I would do is just, if you want to make a bunch of them, let's say 3 pounds, let's say ground beef is on sale. My air fryer went off and I picked up 3 pounds for a really good price. Okay. Check out how nice and golden this is. Can you see that in that camera? This is why I love the air fryer, because of this beautiful color. So I'm going to just insert my meat thermometer in here. Okay. Guess what? Pretty close to 160. It's 159. Okay. 160. So once it's at 160, and I didn't go into the bottom, I went into the side of the meatloaf. I know it's kind of tricky because you can't really see here, but I went into the side. I went into the center. Don't worry about the potatoes because you know those are going to be cooked. You want to go into the meatloaf and get the temperature there. So I promise I'm going to go back to the freezing question, but first I'm going to put on some of my cheese. And I like having some of the cheese fall off because it gets all gooey in the bottom of the air fryer. So I'm just going to pop this in for literally like a couple minutes. Okay. And we're going to talk about freezing again. These beans are probably done. I'm just going to turn them off. But before I walk away from them, I'm going to add that tablespoon of butter in there. This is for my oven. This is the cheese for the oven one. Okay, back to freezing. So you can freeze the meatloaf as is without the sweet potato, because that gives you the option to serve that meatloaf as you wish. The other thing that you can do, because they're portioned individually like that, you can make a mean meatloaf sandwich. Get a nice Kaiser bun, put that meatloaf, top it with even some of this cheddar cheese, a little bit of that horseradish cream that I was telling you about, and you have an awesome sandwich, whether it's for lunch or dinner. Now, if you wanted to kind of do a bit more of a bigger meal prep, then what I would do is cook it fully. So I would prepare it much as we are doing right now, let it cool completely, and then pack it up in an airtight container, tuck it away. And you can even actually put some green beans or some other vegetables that you might want to serve with it. Make it as a meal. a dinner kit, and then pop it in the freezer so that then you can pull it out overnight, let it thaw in the fridge, take it to work for lunch, or when you come home, you have dinner ready to pop in the microwave or put it in the air fryer. That's one of the most common uses of an air fryer, is actually to heat up leftovers. It's because, again, if it's someone coming home after school or after work and they just want to heat something up, they pop it into the air fryer and it's good to go. Okay. So it's really about how much time you want to spend in the after. And by in the after, I mean heating up, warming up, and serving your meal. So that's kind of the difference of freezing. How long will you freeze it for? If you're just freezing the meatloaf raw, you can leave it in there for a few months, but you won't want to because you're going to want to eat them up. And if you're freezing it as a whole meal, I would leave it in there for a couple of weeks. Now, oftentimes you'll hear, well, you could just freeze it, forever. I wouldn't freeze it forever, because what happens is the texture of everything changes over time in the freezer, and you really want it to taste at its best. So the point of freezing it is to help you out later, but not that much later that when you go to heat it up, you're disappointed and say, why did I ever make this? So it's really kind of that routine that you have to remind yourself that you have stuff in the freezer. Because I'm sure we've all done dumpster dive in the freezer, that kind of chest diving where you're like, oh my gosh, this is from 3 years ago. I wonder if it's still good. I think I may have just admitted too much to everybody, Tracie.
Yeah, you and me both, Emily. There's certain things you're like, it's still good, it's frozen. How is it looking in the air fryer?
She's done.
And I'll tell you, this is somebody asked earlier, why would you top the meatloaves with the sweet potato? Well, this is why, and it's really preference. If you like that texture and that yummy, crispy top, then that's why we do it. If you don't want to, you can just cook the meatloaves and then serve your mash on the side, and then just top your meatloaves with the cheese. What do you think, Emily?
This is why. Look at that. Doesn't that look yummy with the sweet potatoes on top?
That looks good.
I can't
Emily,
really give you a side view.
Our requisite taste? Are you gonna?
Well, I have to check the one. Of course I will, but see all this gooiness? Look at, this is all the goo in the bottom here that I love. I'll just add that to there. I'm gonna check the one in the oven first. And okay. How's everybody?
While you do that, let's check everyone else.
Okay, good.
We've got people we've got our folks. Yep, they're all good. Where are you guys at? Good, I see okays. Joan, how you doing? All good? Oh, you're still on music. Yeah. You're good? Okay. Did you pull them out of the oven?
Yes, they came out of the fryer. I don't know if I can show you. Hold on.
Okay, let's see.
Oops. Wait.
Oh, they look. Oh, that looks good.
Yeah.
That looks good, Joan. All right, and we've got the ones out of the oven from Emily.
So these are the ones that just came out of the oven. You can see they're starting to get that little bit of golden top. Okay, this one fell over, but it's still going to be delicious. It's not quite at 160. So again, this does take a little bit longer at that 375 temperature. It probably needs about 5 more minutes before I add the cheese to it. Okay, so I'm going to pop that one back in. There.
Perfect.
Any other questions, Tracie?
I think, you know what, we are almost out of time, and I just wanted to thank everyone who's cooking along. But before we do that, Emily will taste, and while she's tasting that delicious mini meatloaf and sweet potato mash, I'm going to share who's watching, who won the Unbreakable Apron. So I just want to say congratulations to, let me just get the name here, Sandra Pack from St. John's, Newfoundland. Congratulations. We'll reach out and we'll ship you the Unbreakable Apron. So congratulations on that. So Emily, let's take a look. Oh, there she is. I know it's good, but you just have to do the yummy test.
I really do love this. I just love the combination of the sweet potato, the cheese, that little bit of horseradish. It just kind of works so beautifully with the ground beef. I hope that everyone loves it. If you want more horseradish, just serve it alongside if you need something to dip your meatloaf in. I will allow ketchup for those of you that are ketchup and meatloaf fans. I don't think it needs it, but you never know. Sometimes the comfort of ketchup and meatloaf can bring back a lot of good memories for people.
Oh, well, that's great. So as we wrap up, we know it's late, especially on the East Coast, and everyone's ready for their dinner. I just really want to thank everyone who's cooked along with us tonight. You guys did an amazing job. I hope you enjoy your yummy dinner. And we've just got some other comments. So just so you know, this is recorded. This is going to be available on the OC Replay webpage. We will be, since you've registered, you're going to get it in an email directly tomorrow. And I'm just going to share my screen. So if you love this recipe, we have lots of other recipes on our website. We've got beef recipes, chicken recipes, vegan, vegetarian, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, along lots of great meal ideas. So osteoporosis.ca/recipes. Also, so where we found out about the Parmesan and how much calcium, you can visit the Calculate Your Calcium page on the website, and you just go through and you can pick, if you're looking for foods, either milk and alternatives, fruits and vegetables, grains, etc. So you can find out some of the most common foods, how much calcium that they have by using the calcium calculator, podcast, blog, and of course, like I said, this will be available on the OC Replay webpage. And again, just want to thank our partners for helping us put on these great webinars. thinkbeef.ca, thank you so much. Of course, Emily, who's fabulous as always, and Longos, who did the grocery delivery for our cook-along participants. Thank you again. We have another cooking demo. This will be the last one in the series. It will be happening in March. It's a straight cooking demo, so you can relax and watch while Emily does her magic. And we will be sending that out in the next week. So if you subscribe to our website, you will get that directly into your inbox. And we will share more about that in the coming days. And again, to everyone watching, thank you so much. We so appreciate you spending your time with us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Enjoy your evening, everyone. Have a lovely rest of the night. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you.